In fact, what's happening is that a small fraction of one house of the Congress, in fact, the House of Representatives, one small group of right-wing extremists, whatever they may characterize themselves as, is holding hostage the entire House of Representatives, the entire Congress, the entire government, even though it's only one branch and one part of a branch. And I think that Senator Murphy has really explained well our view, and our constituents in Connecticut need to know it, that we're willing to compromise and collaborate, but not with hostage-taking tactics that in effect say to everyone else in the country, it's our way or the highway. And I want to thank my colleague from Connecticut for speaking so clearly and persuasively on this topic, and for giving the impact of this government shutdown a human face and a human voice. The story that he told from Bridgeport has indeed thousands of others just like it across the state of Connecticut, across the country, who are suffering the real hardship and harm of this shutdown. We can talk in the abstract here. Our rhetoric may carry a little bit beyond these four walls, but the real-life consequences belong to them. And both Senator Murphy and I have seen them in real life. And that's why we're here to advocate and fight for those people of Connecticut in Bridgeport, those families who depend on Head Start, those seniors who depend on nutritional assistance, and tell their story as he has done so well today in this chamber. And tell the story also about the Sikorsky workers, men and women, and their families. They do great work for our nation. On their assembly lines, Black Hawk helicopters are made the best in the nation. They perform rescue operations for our troops in Afghanistan. They medevac our nation's warriors to places where they can be saved. They provide resupply and provisions. They are literally life-saving vehicles in our war to keep America safe. And those workers in Sikorsky were told late last week, you're done. You're furloughed. You're not reporting to work next week because 45 inspectors, civilian employees of the United States Department of Defense, are going to be furloughed. 45 inspectors and 1,500 or 2,000 or more workers at Sikorsky on the Black Hawk helicopter line and other essential product assembly told they were going to be furloughed. Senator Murphy and I and other members of our delegation spoke with officials of the Department of Defense and made clear to them our interpretation of recently passed law, that it would apply to employees of the Defense Contract Management Agency whose services were vital to certify and inspect those helicopters, keep open the assembly lines of Sikorsky, and make sure that Black Hawks were continuing to be available to our military men and women who depend on them so vitally. Those conversations, and I'm sure others had them as well with officials of the Department of Defense, along with the action of the House over the weekend to make sure that clearly all our furloughed employees of the United States government will be paid eventually, persuaded Secretary Hagel to do the right thing. And I want to commend Secretary Hagel and thank him for bringing back those employees, like the 45 DCMA inspectors, who have to be there for the Department of Defense to take delivery of those helicopters, which in turn is necessary to keep open the assembly line and keep employed and on the job those Sikorsky workers and countless of hardworking men and women at defense contractors across the United States. I thank Secretary Hagel, but at the same time, we need to recognize that for every Sikorsky, for every Fortune 500 corporation, for every one of those big defense contractors, there are literally thousands of suppliers and small businesses who are continuing in uncertainty and sometimes confusion about what is happening here in Washington. Thousands of other businesses that depend on those suppliers because they provide the raw materials that the suppliers use to turn into the parts for the Sikorsky helicopters. The ripple effect, the ramifications pervade our economy and our society. The uncertainty creates harm and hardship that is immeasurable and perhaps irreparable. The harm is not only to those workers who rightly had the whiplash of being furloughed one day and being called back another and being uncertain as to what the impact ultimately on their lives this shutdown would have, but on the suppliers and the countless other small businesses who cannot plan, cannot look ahead, cannot hire for the future, and sometimes have to tell their workers, you're going to be on furlough. You can't plan to buy a car or a new home or even the most minor things like school supplies or maybe other plans. Lives are in the balance. Lives are at stake. The real-life consequences are real and perhaps lasting for many Americans, not only the family who depends on Head Start or on senior nutrition assistance or on a job in Sikorsky, but the countless others whose lives are also in the balance. And there is a solution to this impasse. Calmer minds, cooler heads, common sense are beginning to reach a consensus that the House should be given a chance to vote.